Joining us right now with the National Shooting Sports Foundation, our friend Larry Keane, who's no stranger to the program. Larry, I bet you're just getting all your ducks in a row to get ready for what's going to happen after this week of themed executive orders, because we've heard during the campaign, Biden has said that he's going to make gun control a priority. And while it hasn't cropped up yet in the first week, I have no doubt that it's going to come up in the first 100 days. What are your thoughts?
Uh, there's really no doubt that it will. I mean, we were a little surprised, frankly, that he didn't follow through on his, day one promise to send a bill to Congress to repeal the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. Um, but they will, and so we are going to have our work cut out for us. As you'll recall, during the campaign, he referred to gun manufacturers as the enemy. More recently, he said he's going to defeat the NRA, and so apparently the NRA is the problem again. So there's no doubt that we will see efforts to restrict and infringe upon our constitutional rights are protected by the Second Amendment, and they will use every tool in the toolbox, from executive orders to policy interpretations to legislation. It might be a little bit more difficult for them to pass legislation because, particularly if Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema are true to their word and will not vote to end the filibuster, which means they need to get 60 votes to move things in the Senate. That becomes much more challenging for them. But we will certainly see lots of things pass out of the House, none of them good. And we'll have to see how things play out in the Senate. But, buckle up. We're in for a rough couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking with Larry Keane of NSSF. I know one of the, because just going by what he's gone on during the campaign, I mean, he's promising the whole kit and caboodle. He's promising, a registry, putting all semi-automatics under NFA rules, meaning, I mean, it's going to be super expensive just to own the most commonly owned firearms, as if that would even pass, if that would even pass somehow a courtroom brawl, considering previous Supreme Court decisions on this, Scalia's remarks on this. The one thing that I think that they might actually try first, Larry, is that Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. And that's where they were trying to go after firearms manufacturers, but yet treating them as though you would a company that makes a defective product and then is liable for the defectiveness of the product. It seems to me that there's like a whole other set of consequences they're not even considering in going after that.
Well, there's a copy of it is on the wall behind me. Very proud of that. So, yeah, there are a lot of members and senators now that weren't around when the law was passed. And so we're going to have to do a lot of re-educating, reprogramming, deprogramming.
Wait a minute. You mean like the media was saying to do to us, Second Amendment voters and supporters?
You're right. The Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act is not unique. It really simply codifies common law that a manufacturer or a retailer that sells a legal, non-defective product in a lawful manner is not responsible for the criminal misuse of the product after it's sold. And by the way, after a background check, right? So, this is not a novel concept, except 20 years ago, the industry was being sued by big city mayors, all Democrats except for one, Rudy Giuliani, and plaintiffs' lawyers and the gun control community, blaming manufacturers and sellers for the criminal misuse of products and their abject failure to control crime in their cities. So it passed overwhelmingly, bipartisan fashion in 2005. And so they're going to take a run at it. We'll see whether they can convince enough members of the Senate and Congress to do this. We're certainly going to work very hard to make sure that this law is kept in place. It doesn't stop all lawsuits. It's not as it's described. It's not blanket immunity. You can still be sued for selling a gun in violation of the law, like you don't do a 4473 or a background check. If the product is defectively designed or manufactured, you can still be sued. Normal lawsuits, that aren't the issue. But when, the city of New York or LA, Chicago, etc., Seattle, Portland, all the cities where we're seeing violence surge, sue the industry and blame us for the criminal misuse of these lawfully sold non-defective products, that's a real problem. You wouldn't sue, Ford or Chevy for drunk driving accidents. Why can you sue a manufacturer of a firearm that was sold, 20 years ago when someone steals it from somebody's home or their car and then goes out and commits mayhem?
Yeah.
The criminal is the person who's solely responsible, not the manufacturer.
Yeah, it doesn't show any kind of interest in actually solving the issue of crime and the motivation for or behind that crime either. And you bring up a good point about the automobiles, and I mean, because that's ultimately that would establish a precedent. And that there are some trial attorneys, Larry, that would be so excited to go after all these different manufacturers in a number of industries.
And that's why the business community writ large strongly supported the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, because they understood that if this nascent theory that was being used about somehow selling guns legally was a quote unquote public nuisance, that theory would be turned on them and they would be subject to these lawsuits. So the business community, National Association of Manufacturers, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, etc., supported the legislation. It was about tort reform and stopping very bad, dangerous legal theories from taking root that would have a very devastating impact on the American economy, not just the Second Amendment. But again, these cases that were being brought by the cities were seeking billions of dollars from the industry. If just one of them had been successful, it would have bankrupted the entire firearms industry.
Wow.
And of course, then the Second Amendment would be just an illusion if there's no industry to make the products consumers can buy.
Yeah. And it brings up, we're talking with Larry Keane of NSSF, the National Shooting Sports Foundation. The other thing I think about too is I don't see how a number of government agencies would escape culpability in going, with this hypothetical argument like it passed. I don't understand how the ROC, how they would actually escape any kind of culpability in this. I mean, I look back at, for instance, the horrible tragedy in Charleston. What isn't really often discussed is the FBI came out and admitted error. It was literally a paperwork error that even allowed that sale to happen in the first place. Because as I understand it, the law of that state, if someone's even charged with a felony, all of your rights are suspended until which time you're either proven innocent or you're convicted and you have the restoration of your rights back, that's a different subject. But the fact remains that, Comey himself came out, PDF is still up on FBI.gov. It was a paperwork error. And there are so many of these examples for a lot of these tragedies.
Yeah, the Charleston situation was a terrible, terrible result. It was a mistake on the part of NICS, which is unfortunate. But the response, of course, is not to make sure it doesn't happen again through the process. They want legislation to force further delays beyond 3 business days, when in fact the FBI had 88 days to complete that investigation, and they didn't, and they never figured out that he was a prohibited person. So, right. But there's a lot of culpability. This is deflection from surging crime and the lack of enforcement of the law, while police departments are told to stand down and not enforce the law, while we have conversations about defunding the police. Coupled with being able to sue manufacturers, this is very, very dangerous. And one of the things I think is going to cause a problem for the left in moving this legislation or any gun control legislation forward is 8.5 million people from all across the demographics, African Americans, women, Asian Americans, Democrats, Republicans, conservative, liberals. 8.5 million people purchased a firearm for the first time last year. That has to give them pause. That there are a lot of people who are concerned about their safety and are now, for the first time in their lives, exercising their Second Amendment rights because they're concerned about their safety and they want to be able to defend themselves. And so these are people who are not going to sit here, their eyes have been opened to the importance of being able to protect yourself. They've experienced these laws. We hear from retailers all the time where first-time buyers are saying, like in California, what do you mean I have to wait 10 days to buy a gun? I need it now.
Yeah, I need
And
it
we say,
now.
well, these are the dumb laws your legislature passed that have no impact on the criminals that are out on the street causing mayhem. They just impact you, the law-abiding
Right.
citizen.
Right. And that's a great point as well. Last question for you, our friend Larry Keane with National Shooting Sports Foundation. By the way, we really missed SHOT Show this year because that's when
Don't y'all?
oh my gosh, missing SHOT Show this year. We got to be able to we got to make sure we don't miss it
Next
next
year,
year,
they'll
Larry.
be back bigger and better than ever. You know, we were supposed to expand into the Caesars Forum, and we would have been the largest show ever. Unfortunately, you know, due to COVID, it just wasn't the prudent thing to do. It wouldn't have been feasible.
Right. No,
But
I
we'll be
understand.
back next year, bigger than better than ever, and looking forward to seeing you there.
Absolutely, absolutely, and then and hopefully we'll be successful in pushing back some of this stuff. I know we're running short on time. I even wanted to ask you about importation of semi-automatics and all of that. Is that anything less than? Is that because that's the other thing that I think maybe could be realistic in getting something through House and Senate right now.
Well, they don't even need to do that. They could simply, through executive order, ban the importation of any and all firearms. They can ban the export. They could block the export of firearms. So there's a lot of things that can be done through executive orders or even policy implementation and interpretations that don't even require an executive order. But you know, there's already a ban on the importation of many popular semi-automatic rifles, and we could see restrictions on exports as well, which you know would affect the industry less so, you know, individual gun owners in America, but importations that could be a real problem.
Yeah, that could be a huge problem. I'm glad I got my G43X now instead of waiting on that. Larry Keane, NSSF, always good to see you, my friend. And next year we'll be there. We'll be strong at SHOT Show. Godspeed.